Good evening. I'm Spot On Weather meteorologist Matthew Euler, and welcome to the weekly Teleconnections discussion. This one on the 13th of November, 2020. So let's go ahead and take a look and see if there are any changes from last Friday's Teleconnections discussion. Let's go right into it. All right. As I mentioned each week, if this is your first time watching the Teleconnections discussion, this shows the Madden-Julian oscillation or MJO phases and areas of enhanced convection. Basically, the MJO ranges from phase 1 through phase 8, and these numbers correspond to where you would typically see the convection or that thunderstorm development, rising air motion basically in the equatorial Pacific, Western Pacific on into the Indian Ocean area. And so this is the phases and where the convection, where that vertical motion is strongest, where that typically sets up. All right, so right now I added this image for this week's Teleconnections discussion. This is actually an infrared or IR satellite image for the 13th of November 2020, just showing the main area of convection, the cloudiness there within that blue outlined circle. You notice the convection, the brighter clouds correspond to the coldest cloud top temperatures, and that generally indicates where you have thunderstorms developing. And really right now, the convection or rising air motion is situated in the Indian Ocean, generally to the south-southeast, south to south-southeast of India. And so this is more consistent with MJO phase 2 or 3. And I just wanted to show you where the convection is most active on today, Friday the 13th of November 2020. So with that being said, this generally, the location here, going off this chart and then going back to the actual satellite imagery where we're having the rising air motion, thunderstorm development, convection, that really correlates more to a Madden-Julian oscillation or MJO phase 2 or 3. If you look at the chart, the numbers 2 and 3 and where that convection is right now. So that's generally what the real-time data is showing, the real-time satellite imagery. It's always good to use that real-time data and compare it to past known relationships. All right, so moving on now to the actual teleconnections portion of this discussion. Again, as a reminder, the MJO, Madden-Julian oscillation temperature composites for the months of November, December, and January are on the left. Generally, for the eastern U.S., phases 3 through 6 are the warmest phases for this time of year. If the MJO is in phases 7 through 1, that's generally corresponding to colder than normal temperatures indicated by the blue shading. Phase 2 becomes more of a transitional phase at this time of year. You'll see some of the yellows and oranges overspreading the upper Midwest, the northern plains, into the spilling into the parts of New England in phase 2. So right now, the graphic on the right shows the latest GFS ensemble forecast for today, the 13th of November, 2020. And this goes all the way out to November 27th, 2020. You'll notice the green line on this particular diagram. That shows the general direction of the MJO. Currently, this chart is indicating the MJO is in a weak phase 1. And generally, it's moving to more amplified phase 2, and that is what we see right now. Now, the inner circle, again, as a reminder, that shows you if the specific dots or the lines are within that very tiny inner circle of this MJO phase diagram, that generally indicates the MJO is in a null phase. So we just came out of a null phase. We're still fairly weak in phase 1 during today on November the 13th, 2020, heading to a little bit more amplification there in phase 2. And we would expect that because of the convection there in the Indian Ocean, right? You see phases 2 and 3 on the diagram at the bottom. That correlates to rising air motion, enhanced convection in the Indian Ocean. And look at this, the satellite image is showing that at the present time. Moving on to the GFS operational MJO forecast. Very similar, that NCEP GFS, the actual operational portion, is that aqua color line next to the green line there. Generally, they're in good agreement here on the 13th of November, and the week in phase 1 for the MJO, and becoming more amplified into phase 2. So very similar if you look at the diagrams and for the forecast from both the GFS Ensemble as well as the GFS Operational. With both these models, there's a tendency, especially with the GFS Operational here, there's a tendency for the MJO to spin back into the null phase, that's inner circle, if you notice, with minimal impact after it amplifies slightly into phase 2 for just a short period of time. Looking at the La Nina update, the latest graphic on the left shows the above and below normal water temperatures. You see the orangish shading there off the west coast of the United States. That indicates above normal water temperatures. There's also an area of above normal temperatures out in the western Pacific to the east of Japan. But you really want to pay close attention to the blue shading there in the equatorial eastern Pacific to the west of South America. That is where we have below normal water temperatures in what is known as the Nino 3.4 region, which indicates a La Nina. The La Nina is still ongoing. The graphic on the right shows the general trace of temperature, how far below normal are the water temperatures in that Nino 3.4 region. And you'll notice how we had quite a significant drop-off between October 9th and all the way to about October 31st around Halloween. We had a pretty significant drop-off from a 0.8 degrees Celsius to a 1.7 degrees Celsius below normal departure for the water temperatures in the eastern equatorial eastern Pacific. But you'll notice now from around Halloween, the end of October, through the present time, we're seeing more of a rise or a climb in that blue dotted line in the bottom right portion of that Nino 3.4 index diagram. And right now, the latest value is up to, it's a 1.099 degrees Celsius departure from normal, below normal. So we are seeing a warming since last week. And that is happening right now in that Nino 3.4 region. Now, why is that important? Because through the winter months, it could play a significant role in our sensible weather for the mid-Atlantic, and that's going to be dependent on this La Nina strength. Now we're almost up to 1 degree Celsius below normal for the water temperatures in the Nino 3.4. Now that's more of a moderate La Nina. It looked like we were heading towards a strong La Nina, and a strong La Nina is typically associated with warm and drier conditions across the mid-Atlantic during the winter season. Whereas a weak to moderate La Nina, we're talking a little bit of difference now to where we could actually still see some winter weather across the eastern U.S. with that kind of weak to moderate La Nina. So this is something that bears watching, this trend. All right, moving on to the actual teleconnections. Starting with the Arctic Oscillation, if you take a look again, negative phase, greater amplification of the polar front jet stream. A positive phase, more of a zonal west to east configuration of the jet stream with faster moving systems. With a negative phase AO, you get the coldest air, highest pressures over the poles. You get the coldest air to basically become dislodged from the Arctic areas into the lower 48, whereas with the positive phase AO, you have more of a west-east jet stream with the coldest air and low pressure remaining up over the North Polar area. So let's take a look at the latest forecast or outlooks from the models. For the European deterministic Arctic Oscillation forecast, you'll notice the white dotted line that represents the latest run of the predictions for the AO according to the European deterministic model. And we're looking at sharply positive AO conditions basically from today all the way through around the 19th to the 20th of November. But then you'll notice a sharp drop-off in the forecast for the Arctic Oscillation after the 22nd, around the 22nd of November. You see a drop-off sharply negative. So this is an interesting difference from last week's presentation. You look at the European EPS AO 50 perturbed members. This is a 15-day forecast out to the 28th of November. Not quite as abrupt with that drop-off from the strongly positive state down to a slightly negative state right around the 22nd to the 24th of November, and then back to a neutral state after that. We look at the European EPS Arctic Oscillation 50 perturbed members. This is an extended outlook all the way out 46 days to the end of December. Again, strongly positive to start here, right on through the 26th, 24th, 26th November, and then you notice more of a neutral trend there in the middle of the graphic, that green line from the 5th through about the 11th of December, and then back to positive again. So just something to keep in mind. And then this is the GFS deterministic AO, or Arctic Oscillation Forecast, in quite a bit of agreement with the European deterministic on today's runs. Notice that big drop off, that white dashed line on the latest run, digging down into negative territory from strongly positive, which would indicate mild temperatures in the eastern U.S., through the 21st of November, dropping sharply negative between 21 and 25 November, getting close to Thanksgiving time period. There's a little bit of a slight rise after that, after the 26th of November, back to slightly positive, but nothing super strong like we're seeing now. Here's the NSAP JAPS version 12 AO, 30 perturbed members, 16-day forecast out to basically the end of November, 29 November, showing again we're in a positive phase of the AO all the way out through about the 21st of November. Then we drop slightly negative. So most of these runs, these models are picking up that drop off in a brief period of negative AO, and then back to neutral conditions here on this particular model, the NSAP JAPS V12. For the NAO forecast, North Atlantic Oscillation, and here's your reminders again: positive NAO phase on the left and negative NAO phase on the right. And what's most striking about the negative NAO phase is that blocking, the upper level ridge pushing into Greenland, strong blocking of the northern oceans. And what that tends to do is you get more of a stuck weather pattern along the east coast of the U.S., and you get a fairly amplified jet stream with a negative NAO phase. And within that deep trough, at the base of that trough, actually just downstream of that trough axis, the long wave trough axis, you get that low pressure to form and more coastal storm development. Well, the thing is with that blocking high off to the northeast, those coastal storms in a negative NAO have a hard time going out to sea, and they tend to impact the whole east coast from far south as Florida all the way up to Maine, with a pretty good, you've got the cold, you got the precip, and you have a pretty good possibility of a strong nor'easter with wintry precip with a negative NAO phase. On the other hand, with that positive NAO phase on the left, more of a zonal west-east jet stream, milder Pacific air dominating most of the country, not much amplitude in the polar front jet, therefore you really don't get strong coastal storms. And also with the positive NAO phase, you notice the absence of blocking with the upper level jet stream with that configuration. All right, so let's take a look at the European deterministic NAO forecast, showing basically today a strongly positive phase NAO, eventually balancing out to a neutral phase, but on the 17th of November, then back up to slightly positive and back down to negative after 21 November. So something to keep an eye on with the European deterministic NAO forecast. Here's European the EPS, NAO 50 perturbed members. Notice a slightly positive trend in the NAO through the 17th of November, transitioning neutral from the 19th to the 28th of November, that green line. Notice it's pretty much straddling, not deviating too far from that horizontal black zero, the zero line itself. Here's the European EPS NAO 50 perturbed members, 46-day forecast out through late December, the last week of December, just right after Christmas. You'll notice a neutral NAO for the most part, especially from 21 November to 21 December. Again, that green line, you notice how it straddles the zero line, so not much of a strongly positive or strongly negative NAO phase with this particular model. And then here's the GFS deterministic NAO forecast, showing a strongly positive phase at the beginning of November. But now we're transitioning, we're still positive, we went neutral, back to positive, and now we're coming back down closer. A lot of ups and downs in the GFS deterministic NAO forecast. You'll notice the white line there, the white circles, a lot of ups and downs, but if you average out from basically the 16th of November through the last few days of November, if you average out those ups and downs, those peaks and valleys, you pretty much get a neutral condition. And then NSAP JAPS V12, NAO 30 perturbed members out through the 29th of November. More of a positive NAO. Again, that does not favor the high latitude blocking in the North Atlantic, more of a zonal west-east jet configuration through about the 21st of November, trending more neutral in the NAO forecast by 22 November, and then from there on out, pretty much neutral the rest of November. Now on to the Pacific North American forecast, the PNA. Reminder here about positive versus negative PNA. Positive PNA occurs when you get a huge ridge in the western U.S. You get that upper level ridge and above normal temperatures, the western U.S. You get the troughing east of the Rocky Mountains, and you get below normal temperatures there. And with a negative PNA, it's just the reverse pattern. So now you've got the trough in the western U.S. with below normal temperatures and some precipitation, possibly wintry. In the east with a negative PNA, you get more of a ridge and above normal temperatures. So that's the difference between the two. This PNA pattern has been a big player in the last couple of winters, producing some very cold air in the northern plains, Montana, Dakotas, stretching back to the Pacific Northwest with that trough and persistent storm systems coming into the Pacific Northwest. So here's the European deterministic PNA forecast for today, showing a negative PNA, and fairly sharply negative. We're down between -2 and -3 through the 15th of November. Then you see a bit of a slow climb in the white circles there, that line identified by the white circles, up to neutral territory by the 18th of November. And then just kind of, straddling the zero line, becoming more neutral beyond that point. Looking at the European EPS PNA, 50 perturbed members. You notice a negative PNA initially, fairly strongly negative even on the European EPS. You'll see that lasting through about the 17th of November before things the green line, everything kind of neutrals, becomes more neutral, kind of straddles that zero line. And then maybe slightly negative again beyond the 23rd of November through the rest of the month. But, nothing earth-shattering there at the end of the month. The European EPS PNA 50 perturbed members, this is a 46-day forecast out through the end of December. Again, strongly negative through about the 16th of November. And then coming back up closer to neutral for a good portion, maybe a little bit of a dip there around the 26th of November, and then back to neutral conditions straddling the zero line once again, before becoming negative again beyond the 17th of December through the last week of December in the year 2020. And then the GFS deterministic PNA forecast showing a sharply positive PNA initially in the early parts of the month, but then you saw the major dip from around the 3rd of November to the 6th of November. That was quite a drop-off. But then you see the white lines, kind of those white circle area, that line, how it tends to go back towards a neutral line around the 17th of November, and then back to negative again beyond the 17th of November through a good portion of the remaining part of November. And then finally, the NCEP JEFS V12 showing a negative PNA with the trough in the west and favoring more of a ridge setup, the ridge off the southeast coast. Generally slightly negative conditions overall in the forecast period out through the 29th of November according to JEFS V12. Moving on to the Eastern Pacific Oscillation Forecast, EPO. As a reminder, the negative EPO oscillation, there's your pressure system configuration. High pressure in the Gulf of Alaska, lower pressure at lower latitudes. And you get, with that high pressure, that ridge building into Alaska. On the front side of that ridge, you get a dislodging of colder Arctic air into the United States in the lower 48. With a positive EPO phase on the right, we're showing the low pressure now in the Gulf of Alaska, with high pressure straddling the about the 23 to 25 degree north latitude belt, and more mild air, more Pacific air from west to east coast, and above normal temperatures pretty much dominating the whole U.S. with a positive EPO. So let's look at the European deterministic EPO forecast, showing a very strongly positive EPO right now. That's warm. That's a warm situation there, right? Positive, mild air across much of the U.S. We have seen a little bit of cold air outbreaks occasionally, but they have been very short-lived. But now, look at the forecast. The European deterministic drops the EPO off from a value of +4 all the way down to just like right around -1.8 by the 17th of November, and then more neutral conditions. You see the white circle line there, straddling the zero line in the future. That's European deterministic. What about the European EPS? 50 perturbed members for the EPO. Generally strongly positive through about the 16th of November, and then coming down negative, getting negative, just slightly negative, not by much, and then coming back positive again back towards the end of November. The European EPS 50 perturbed members, 46-day forecast. Notice the green line here. We're sitting in negative territory from the 16th to about the 23rd of November, becoming more positive after the 23rd of November, and then generally trending back towards neutral for EPO. And then the GFS deterministic EPO forecast. The analysis is the blue line there, where that line's been, and that white circle, again, that line identified by the white circles, that's the forecast, showing a strongly positive EPO that would indicate warmer temperatures in the eastern U.S. Quite a drop-off, though, again, around the 17th to 18th of November, and then a sharp rise again beyond the 22nd of November there towards the latter part. About the 22nd to 25th of November, then a major drop-off after that. And then the NCEP Jeffs V12 EPO, 30 perturbed members. Look at this. We've got a strongly positive EPO through about the 16th of November, dropping to neutral territory, all the way out through about the 23rd of November, and then coming back positive 23rd to 26th, and then a slight drop-off again closer to neutral conditions, 27, 28, 29 November. All right, let's take a look at the latest polar vortex forecast. We talk a lot about the polar vortex. It has a major implication on temperatures in the winter season in the northern hemisphere. The image on the left shows the current state of the polar vortex on today, the 13th of November 2020. Notice the blue shading, that's where the coldest temperatures are, and also the concentric white lines, which that indicates geopotential height. We're looking way up in the atmosphere here. For temperature, we're looking at about 30 millibar level, as well as the decameter, the height. So the geopotential heights, the white lines, the concentric white lines, and then that blue shading is temperature scale, up at 30 millibars for both. So generally we have the polar vortex, the image on the left, generally located over the northern polar areas where it should be, with the coldest air remaining well to the north. It's concentric, so we see no changes to configuration as of today. But look at the image on the right, which goes out to the 29th of November, and you see how the white lines are stretched out, becoming more oval-shaped, more elongated. That's something we'll have to keep an eye on in the coming week to see if that trend in the models continues. Sometimes these models, they're not very consistent, let's just put it that way, with the polar vortex and the handling of it. But as of right now, the coldest air is poised to remain over the polar areas, but that elongation towards the end of this model run today could, something to really bear in mind and keep an eye on. All right, so my final thoughts on tonight's Teleconnections discussion. The Matt-Julian oscillation, MJO, is currently in weak phase 1. It's forecast to slightly amplify to a phase 2. And what we'd expect is near average temperature phase 2 for the eastern U.S. by about the 21st of November. Then a return to the null phase with minimal impact to near average temperatures. So MJO is really, if anything, we're looking at near average temperatures for the eastern U.S. according to the MJO. It briefly goes a little more amplified in the phase 2, but not really a major player right now. That could change. Now, La Nina conditions continue across the equatorial eastern Pacific. I find this interesting. We went from a 1.5 degrees Celsius below normal water temperature situation, and now we've warmed up to a 1.1 degrees Celsius below normal temperature situation. So the waters in that Nino 3.4 region have actually warmed 0.4 of a degree Celsius. And, you're thinking 0.4 of a degree Celsius, that's not a big deal. We're talking about a body of water which takes quite a long time to cool off and to heat up, because water is such a dense substance. So it's impressive that we've kind of trended that way more towards more weaker La Nina conditions. What does that mean now with a weakening La Nina condition, with those temperatures getting a little bit warmer? That would indicate near average temperatures for the eastern U.S. What about the European and GFS deterministic models? What about that Arctic oscillation, that important Arctic oscillation? Both the European and GFS deterministic models indicating a sharp drop in the AO around the 21st of November, with the potential for colder temperatures across the eastern U.S. So initially, we're looking at a strongly positive Arctic oscillation. That would indicate mild temperatures, fairly mild temperatures, slightly above average, if anything. Possibly dropping to below average if the European and GFS deterministic models do verify. Moving on to the North Atlantic Oscillation, NAO, the summation on that, models are indicating a slightly positive trend in the NAO through 17 November with a change to neutral, slightly negative conditions after the 21st of November, What does that mean? If we don't have a strongly negative NAO, that basically means neutral or a positive NAO. We're having a lack of strong high latitude blocking in the northern oceans, the North Atlantic. That lack of blocking will allow for more progressive weather pattern with faster moving systems. And actually, the models over the last 2 days have been showing that, like quickly changing movement of troughs and ridges across the country from west to east with the associated temperature patterns below normal, above normal. So we have equal chances for mild or below average temperatures. It's kind of a 50-50 shot if we get trend more towards the neutral phase of NAO. As far as European and GFS deterministic models are indicating a negative trend in the PNA through 19 November, which that's going to favor the coldest temperatures out in the western U.S., with the mildest temperatures in the eastern U.S. Typically, you get the trough with the colder air in the west, and then you get that ridge, that southeast ridge right off the coast. Builds and it strengthens, and it doesn't allow cold fronts really to come through very easily all the way to the coast. So overall, with a negative trend in PNA forecast, we'd expect more mild temperatures for the eastern U.S. Now, models are indicating a neutral trend in the Eastern Pacific Oscillation, EPO, through about 29 November. Neutral phase, near average temperatures is what you'd expect for the east. And then models are indicating a strong polar vortex, which that's maintaining its position over the North Polar area through 29 November. There's possible more elongation now by the end of the month. Now, that would favor initially just mild temperatures. Now, if the elongation leads to any kind of split or stretching of any sort, then we could see colder temperatures later down the line. So it's something to keep an eye on. Always keep an eye on that polar vortex. So the overall assessment on tonight's teleconnections discussion, conditions look to feature near average temperatures for the eastern U.S. through the 21st of November. Now, when I say near average temperatures, I want you to think of the fact that we'll get some cold shots. They'll be quick hitting cold shots, though. They won't stick around. We don't have blocking in the North Atlantic. The NAO is not negative. The AO is not negative, really sharply negative at any stretch. So therefore, we can expect quick hitting shots of cold air coming down from eastern Canada. And then those will be replaced. The air mass will modify. And then maybe we get a warm surge of air, change in direction with high pressure off the east coast and more of a southwesterly wind pattern. And that was going to yield an above average period. So you take the above average period and then the below average periods, you get near average temperatures. So don't expect consistent temperatures, but there'll be a lot of ups and downs, and it averages out to close to the average temperature for this time of year, if that makes sense, in the east. Eventually, though, if that European deterministic and the GFS deterministic are correct, we're expecting a drop to below average temperatures in the eastern U.S. between 21 and 26 November. Again, we will see quick hitting shots of cold air, but they won't last. They won't be long lasting. With the progressive pattern, the jet stream is more prone to reconfigure itself to more of a zonal or west to east pattern, which pushes systems along from west to east and the west coast to the east coast of the U.S. much quicker. So we really don't have big storm systems firing up in those kind of conditions either. So we will not see a particular mild or cold pattern locked into place, is what I'm saying. All right, that wraps things up on tonight's teleconnection discussion video. I hope you enjoy these videos. There's a lot to look at when we look at the atmosphere. It's not just simply, looking out your window and saying, oh, it's sunny today or it's cloudy. The atmosphere is a three-dimensional fluid, and so you really have to take a hard look at all these different things. We're all connected across the sphere. The Earth is a big sphere. Everything moves from west to east in the north, in the mid latitudes, between 30 and 60 degrees latitude. So you have to look upstream. You have to look out to the west to see what's happening in the Pacific. You have to see what's going on in those MJO phases. You have to also look at the condition of the ENSO, whether it's La Nina or El Nino phases. This has been proven over time that certain conditions set up for the winter seasons for the mid-Atlantic and the eastern U.S. when La Nina and El Nino set up, or maybe you have ENSO neutral conditions where we don't have an El Nino or a La Nina. We're kind of like right there in the middle. So you have to look at the Arctic oscillation. I was looking back at some charts earlier in the week, and I was in awe. I'm looking at the comparisons to the year 2010, 2011, that winter. The water temperature anomalies right now are strikingly similar that November 2010 to now, November 20, very similar to each other. And it was a very cold winter that winter, even during a La Nina setup. So again, no two La Ninas are ever alike, and I always say that, but that's the truth. Additionally, looking at the North Atlantic Oscillation, we have high latitude blocking, something to keep an eye on in the coming weeks, as well as the Pacific North American pattern. Will that negative PNA finally break to a positive phase, and where we get a trough, more amplified, more persistent troughing in east of the Mississippi River, or will that not happen? All right, so that wraps things up. I hope everybody enjoys the video. I hope everybody is staying healthy. Best wishes for continued great health to everybody out there. I know it's a tough time right now in the country with the COVID and the rapid rise of the infection rates. Please take care of each other. Please practice your social distancing. But again, thank you for your subscription to my channel. I really appreciate it. I love to share my knowledge of the weather with you. And I really hope these videos open up your mind, open up your mind to the possibilities of what is so exciting about meteorology. The fact that there's so many unknowns that still exist out there. There's been countless research done in these areas, but you know what? You might be that person at some point in time in the future that cracks that code in one of these teleconnections that really is a game changer for the community. So keep inquisitive in your mind. And again, spot on weather. If we're not spot on, we're not doing the right, take care, everybody. Stay healthy. Have a great